Across China, the coronavirus outbreak has closed shops, restaurants, and now Beijing's Great Hall of the People. Every March, the venue hosts the country's most important political event, the National People's Congress. But China's top lawmakers have voted to delay the parliamentary gathering, urging its 3,000 delegates to stay home to fight the epidemic. Protecting the capital from a major outbreak has also become a priority. Beijing reported a sharp increase in cases over the weekend, bringing the total to about 400. Many are still too afraid to return to work.
Our company has less than 100 employees, and now we only have around 10 people working in the office.
I thought the subway to work was going to be packed, but there actually weren't many people.
Also announced the banning of trade in illegal wildlife. The virus is thought to have originated in a Wuhan wildlife and seafood market. Most of new coronavirus cases and fatalities have been concentrated in Hubei. 24 of China's 31 provinces reported no new cases in the past 24 hours. 6 have lowered emergency response levels. President Xi Jinping has described the epidemic as a crisis and a major test, but he is encouraging manufacturers and other industries to restart operations where possible.
In key industries on which the national economy and people's livelihood hinges, enterprises are accelerating operation resumption and working at full swing to increase production.
It's the first time China's National People's Congress has been delayed in decades. So far, no new date has been set. But analysts say when the meeting is rescheduled, that will be the biggest indicator that China has finally won its so-called war against the coronavirus outbreak. Katrina Yu, Al Jazeera, Beijing.
Well, let's get more now from Adrian Brown in Hong Kong. Adrian, the postponement of the National People's Congress is hugely significant, and there have been conflicting messages about the Wuhan lockdown. What does this suggest about the authorities' control of the situation?
Well, that's right. Earlier on Monday, the authorities in Wuhan announced that people who weren't residents of the province of Hubei and were showing no sort of outward symptoms of the virus could apply to leave. Then, just a few hours later, another government department in the provincial government said, actually, that's wrong. That order, that instruction has now been rescinded. So it was more confusion coming, of course, after what was a week of confusion last week when China changed once more the way that it has its testing method for people who have the virus. So what we're seeing in China at the moment, I think, is gradually the sort of infection rate and the death rate is falling. People are still dying, but they're not dying in the same numbers they were, say, this time a month ago. We also know that the recovery rate now stands at about, well, almost 25,000. That's about a third of the people who've been infected. So a third of those infected have been recovering. That's good news. The bad news, though, came from the World Health Organization in Beijing on Monday. They held a joint news conference with officials from China's National Health Commission, and they had the shocking news that some 3,000 medical workers have so far been infected with the virus. One of the reasons for the high infection rate, poor protection, and also the fact that these doctors and nurses are fatigued. And any doctor will tell you that if you're very, very tired, you're much more prone, much more vulnerable to infection. And also on Monday, as Katrina pointed out in her report, China made the almost historic decision to cancel the National People's Congress. This is, you know, the biggest political event of the year in China. I can't recall an occasion in all my years of covering China when the NPC has been cancelled. It's very important because, you know, what happens at this conference is keenly anticipated by economists all around the world because, of course, they want to know what China's economic targets are for the year ahead, particularly now as China's economy is slowing. And, of course, as a result of this virus, it's going to be slowing even more. And if China's economy slows, then the whole world's economy slows. So today we've seen, in a sense, the economic and political impact of this virus.
OK, Adrian Brown there, live for us in Hong Kong. Thank you. Well, Well, let's get more on this now from EINAR TANGEN. He's a China Affairs Analyst and joins us now live from Beijing. Good to have you with us on the News Hour. Let's start with the cancelling of the NPC. Would you say this is a purely practical measure, or is there a political element to this as well?
No, I think anyone who's looking at this and sounding some sort of alarmist tone is wrong. I'm here in Beijing. They're leading by example. No basketball games will not resume until April 1st. This would have taken place in early March, around March 3rd, 4th. And what they're doing is just simply acknowledging that the logistics of bringing thousands and thousands of people from all over China, literally every corner of China, into Beijing and then having them stay and then take them back is too daunting when you're in the midst of a health crisis. Right now, the focus is simply on dealing with what is in front of them, and that is this virus.
Well, in terms of how the authorities are coping with this, do you think that, I mean, we heard there from Adrian Brown, there were conflicting messages about the lockdown on Wuhan. We were told at the beginning of the day that people would be allowed in and out. Now we're told actually that was a mistake. The lockdown remains in place. All the health workers who are exhausted and contracting the virus. Does this suggest that the authorities aren't in control and they're losing control of this? Or would you say everything is progressing fine?
Well, nothing is progressing fine while people are being sick and dying. But under the circumstances, given a very highly infectious disease, and the numbers that you were quoting earlier, the fact that the vast majority of provinces have reported a downtick, no new infections, it seems that China has come up with a way of solving this. It was very aggressive. They told people they basically quarantine 100 million people. They cut off different cities and towns. They slowed the economy down. They delayed going back to work. I think they've had it pretty much in control. I've actually been here in Beijing. I know Adrian is in Hong Kong. That it's very calm, it's very collected, very cautious, and surprisingly, people are very kind. The communities have come together. People offer me face masks, and these are very precious things. And it's something that, you know, unless you're here, you don't really know how to assess it.
But would you suggest that this way of sorting things out, I mean, yes, the Chinese have thrown practically everything at it, but the virus has spread, and it has spread now to Europe. We're now seeing large numbers of people contracting the virus there, and in Iran. I mean, China did lock down things very, very quickly, but it still managed to spread despite Chinese efforts.
Yes, it did. I mean, there was a slight delay in the beginning due to, and I think the Chinese government has acknowledged that there were a lot of municipal and provincial officials who wanted to avoid bad news. They did not assess it correctly. There was some delay. I don't know that that was dispositively what caused it, because if you start looking at the difference in times, if this is a 14-day incubation period, these people caught it 2 weeks ago, and that was well after this quarantine started. So I don't know that it's necessarily going to be productive by pointing fingers. The issue is what kind of response are these countries going to do? And I think you'll see that China is very supportive of them, which was not the case for a lot of countries in terms of when China was going through this.
OK, EINAR TANGEN, thanks very much for joining us there live from Beijing.